But today I'm going to be talking about a close runner-up, that of Jack Della Maddalena, who stormed through the UFC's welterweight division with his excellent boxing and grit and determination, and he fights Belal Muhammad in a few weeks. So I'm going to be breaking down what makes Jack Della Maddalena the best boxer at 170 pounds and arguably in the UFC. So first of all, it's his stance and his footwork. Then there's his guard and head movement, and the fact that he is effective out of both stances. He uses the jab excellently, and he always punches in combination. So let's take a look at his stance and footwork. Stance and footwork. Similarly to Ilia Topuria, Jack has a very long boxing stance, and he takes small incremental steps forwards and backwards, stalking his opponent. This is again great for slowly making your way into range without your opponent noticing, but it's also great for moving out of the way, away from punches, but just slightly enough that he can still counter. You see a lot of people, they'll move back and they'll move back way out of range so they can't counter. They're safe, but they're not actively engaged in the exchange. Jack, however, similarly to Topuria, just a little bit. There's a chance that he'll get hit, but it's worth it to stay in range. He'll move ever so slightly out of range and come back in. He's very good with the momentum of going back and forward and back and forward. And this is excellent for remaining defensively responsible and setting up pull counters or just counters in general. With those 4-ounce gloves, it's really important to mix up your defenses, but also with the 4-ounce gloves, any counter shots are going to be extremely hard. You see this in his fight against Ange Loosa and Pete Rodriguez. He is excellent at moving ever so slightly out of the way and countering. Guard and head movement. Obviously, having a boxing-based style means you're going to move your head a lot. And this is made a lot easier for Jack by his stance. You need to plant your feet and be sturdy to be able to move your head. And Jack moves his head quite a lot, having excellent timing and just making good reads on punches. Just moving his head ever so slightly out of the way. Again, his head movement isn't big, it's not flashy, it's subtle, and it's extremely effective. And to pair with his head movement, he has an excellent high guard, similar to a Petr Yan, where he just keeps his hands tucked at his head at almost all times. Now, when his opponent's jabbing and sort of being a little bit more dynamic, he will start to parry away punches. He doesn't just stick to one type of defense, and this is extremely important in MMA. He's got the pullbacks out of the way with his footwork, he's got the head movement, and he's got parries, and he's got an excellent high guard, and he uses these all together really, really beautifully. And the good thing about his head movement is that because he's always in range, if he moves his head off center line, he's always able to counter. And having that head movement makes him extremely good at counters. You see against Danny Roberts, he was able to drill body shot counters under shots, and it's just one of the most beautiful things to watch when Jack is getting in his defensive rhythm. It's just awesome. Effective out of both stances. Jack is extremely proficient in both southpaw and orthodox. He doesn't just use step-through combinations, he will actively fight for extended rounds in one stance and then switch to the other. And he seems to be just as good in both stances, still drilling the same offensive techniques and still having the same defensive skills as, the other. He does seem to prefer southpaw, which is really interesting because from most of his knockouts, you'll see that he's actually primarily a right-handed fighter, and he seems to have a lot more faith in the power in his right hand. But he seems to prefer the right hook as opposed to a straight right. Jack very much has power in both hands and is not afraid to use it. He will step through on combinations and switch stances. He will shift his feet, change angles, and change stances off of that. And it just makes it very difficult for opponents to realize which angle certain strikers are coming from. And it's just, again, it's also effective at loading up power. You have your lead hand, you're throwing your lead hand, you take an angle and you switch to the opposite stance. That lead hand now becomes your power hand. You can start drilling in harder shots. He does this primarily in most of his fights. He'll start off kind of orthodox and then he'll go southpaw. That's something, it's quite a bit. He will as a fight goes on, he will start to go southpaw, but he will still rely on the right hand. And he also, one thing that's very impressive is he will jab out of both stances. Even as a southpaw, he will still get behind that jab all day. Speaking of the jab, Jack Della Maddalena has an excellent jab, both on its own and in combination out of both stances. The majority of his long combinations will always start from the jab. He'll often jab, then start up Pete Rodriguez's face pretty damn bad with just a jab. And considering Jack has kettlebells for hands and is a right-handed fighter and fights mainly out of southpaw, that jab can do a lot of damage. But again, he puts it behind pretty much everything he does, and it's great at just racking up volume and setting up his combinations, getting the hands high so he can drill to the body and then go back upstairs. He's just a firm believer in that, and he builds a lot of his strikes off of it really, really effectively. Again, out of both stances, which is really impressive because as a southpaw, you're dealing with that lead hand battle. So to have an effective jab is really standing out amongst the masses. Combination punching. This is what makes Jack Della Maddalena and Ilia Topuria stand out amongst the other boxers in the UFC. Topuria said on the Joe Rogan podcast that sure, people block the first, second, and third punches, but after the second, they start to drop their hands, and that's when, 3, 4, 5, 6 come through. You see in Topuria's knockouts, it's a accumulation of strikes. Will start ripping the body, ripping to the head, and then eventually a shot will land and KO them. This is really, really effective, obviously, because you can mix up targets, keep the exchanges long, gives your opponent more time to make a mistake. But the thing is, it's better in terms of energy conservation, right? You see big power punches. There's power punches that rely on their explosiveness, and then there's power punches that rely on punching hard. Jack and Topuria are both ones that rely on hitting hard. They don't have this insane explosive muscle like a Yoel Romero or Francis Ngannou. Their power comes from dense bones and good technique. And that's why Jack and Topuria can both rip multiple shots in combination and get the KO blow consistently throughout fights. Jack is excellent in starting with the jab, then ripping multiple shots to the body, going up to the head, and he's folded multiple people with just body shots. Randy Brown and Ramzan Ameev, two pretty good examples of this, where he just was relentless on them. And even Gilbert Burns, Jack, again, was just drowning Gilbert Burns with boxing combinations until Burns was obviously able to, shoot a takedown, and Jack had a broken arm and struggled to defend it. But again, when Jack gets going with his combinations, he is an absolute freight train, and it's very, very difficult to stop him. But his combination punching is truly exceptional, especially because he is a power puncher. He's not just volume, he's power. He will do damage with his shots. Jack fights for the title against Belal Muhammad at UFC 315 in a few weeks. A lot of people are overlooking Jack in this matchup, thinking that he just simply doesn't have the takedown defense or ability to beat Belal. However, no bias at all. Just kidding. Jack actually has a really, really good chance of winning this because of his scrambling ability, his grit, and his toughness. The striking style that he has, his ability to rip, shots to the body and be comfortable with pressure, I think will be very important. But again, his scrambles are insane, and I've seen Leon Edwards completely broken still scramble against Belal Muhammad and have success, and I think Jack is a much better jiu-jitsu player than Leon Edwards, and I think that'll pay off for him. So I do see Jack Della Maddalena winning. I might do a more in-depth breakdown on that later on. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the breakdown. Hope you learned something new. You guys know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you later.